There are moments in life when something invisible begins to move, not outside of us, but within us. You can't name it, you can't see it, but you feel it. It's the quiet turning of a page in your spirit. The atmosphere changes, air gets lighter, and you realize the chains that held your home, your mind, your finances have begun to break. That is the power of this psalm, not as poetry, but as a living current of divine restoration. Tonight, I want you to listen not just with your ears, but with your spirit. Because if you let this word enter your home, you will feel it shift. The spirit of poverty is subtle. It doesn't always arrive with an empty bank account or an overdue bill. Sometimes it shows up quietly, dressed as doubt, wearing the voice of limitation. It tells you, be realistic. Don't dream too big. Settle for what you have. It hides inside conversations where hope feels too expensive to afford. And over time, it becomes the background music of our lives, the soft hum of not enough. Before we can silence it, we must be willing to recognize it, not in others, but in ourselves. Because it is not what you own that defines poverty. It is what you believe about what you're worthy of. It begins with small thoughts. I can't afford to rest. I can't risk trying again. This is just how life is for people like me. Those words build invisible walls. They turn abundance into a faraway land that only other people can reach. But the truth is, the spirit of poverty doesn't live in your wallet. It lives in your agreement with those lies. Every time you speak lack over your life, reinforce its hold. Every time you call yourself unlucky, unworthy, or unchosen, you feed the very thing you wish to be free from. You see, the spirit of poverty isn't just financial, it's emotional, relational, spiritual. It can starve you of joy, love, and possibility just as easily as it can steal your money. To recognize it is to shine light into a shadowed corner. It's the moment you realize, wait, this isn't God's voice. God does not speak in scarcity. He doesn't operate from fear. His language is abundance, not in excess, but in sufficiency, in the sacred rhythm of more than enough. The shift begins when you stop agreeing with lack and start aligning with truth. That truth may feel foreign at first, because when you've lived in survival mode long enough, peace can feel suspicious. But peace is the sound of heaven restoring order. It's the reminder that you were never meant to live small, or scared, or bound. When you start recognizing the spirit of poverty, also begin to notice how it disguises itself in relationships built on dependency, in decisions driven by fear, in a heart that no longer believes it deserves beauty or rest. It shows up as business without purpose, effort without fulfillment. And when you see it clearly, you can finally say, I see you, but you no longer have authority here. That awareness is the first act of deliverance. It's the moment your spirit begins to remember abundance. Recognition isn't about shame. It's about awakening. Because you cannot change what you refuse to name. The power to silence the spirit of poverty begins the very moment you acknowledge its presence. Once you do, already started the shift. You've already begun to break agreement with the lie that says you are not enough, or that there isn't enough. And as that awareness deepens, something inside you begins to rise. Not pride, but freedom. Quiet, holy confidence that says, I was created for more than this. And that's where the shift truly begins. There are words that move the air, and there are words that move the spirit. The Psalms belong to that second kind. They are not just verses to be read. They are living frequencies that shift the unseen. When you speak them, something eternal answers. You can almost feel the echo rise inside of you, as if heaven itself is leaning closer. That is the power of the word. It was never meant to be a recital of memory, but a declaration of dominion. And when you speak this psalm, it becomes more than poetry, becomes a weapon. A spiritual instrument that dismantles everything that tries to steal your peace, your provision, your promise. You see, the battle against the spirit of poverty is not fought with effort. It is fought with utterance. There's a difference between reading the word and releasing it. When you read it, your eyes engage. But when you release it, your spirit leads. The atmosphere listens when faith speaks. Every syllable becomes a strike against the forces that whisper lack. The psalm is not asking for permission. It's announcing authority. It's saying, let there be light, in the places where scarcity has taken root. When you speak this psalm, you're not reminding God of his promises. You're reminding your soul of who he already is. You're calling your spirit back into alignment with divine truth. You're shifting from desperation to declaration. Poverty thrives on silence, on passivity, on the belief that nothing will change. But when you open your mouth and release the word, you create motion in the unseen. Heaven responds to sound. Creation itself was born from spoken word. So when you speak this psalm with faith, you're not repeating old lines. You're participating in the same creative power that birthed worlds. It's not about the performance of your voice, but the posture of your heart. You could whisper the words and still shake the gates of lack. Because what carries power is not volume, it's conviction. The moment you speak the psalm believing that God's abundance is your inheritance, that moment becomes sacred. It's as if the atmosphere bows and the spirit of poverty begins to tremble. The very space around you starts to shift, not dramatically at first, but deeply. The tension lifts. The fear loosens. Peace enters like light through a crack in the door. There is something extraordinary about declaring what is already true. The psalm reminds you that you are not pleading with God for scraps. You are aligning yourself with His abundance. Are not trying to convince Him to bless you. You are allowing His word to reveal that you already are. When you speak the word, you stop agreeing with lack and begin to resonate with provision. It's not that the psalm changes your reality. It changes you within your reality. And when that happens, everything around you starts to obey the sound of faith. Because the moment you speak this psalm with authority, the atmosphere shifts and the spirit of poverty begins to fall silent. The most powerful shifts in life never start outside of us. They begin in the quiet corridors of the mind. Before anything changes in your circumstances, something has to change in the way you think. The spirit of poverty doesn't only chain your finances. It locks your thoughts, your imagination, your expectations. It convinces you to live as if abundance is always somewhere else, belonging to someone else, always just out of reach. But what if the breakthrough you've been waiting for isn't waiting at all? What if it's already here, waiting for you to think differently? The mind is sacred ground. Every thought is a seed, and whatever you water will grow. When you repeat words of fear, doubt, and insufficiency, you are unknowingly tending to the soil of lack. But when you begin to meditate on the word, when the psalm becomes not just something you say, but something you think, breathe, and believe, you start to reprogram your inner world. The word becomes oxygen for your thoughts, and suddenly, where there used to be anxiety, peace starts to take root. You can't receive abundance with a mind trained to survive. When you've lived in struggle long enough, the idea of ease feels dangerous, even suspicious. So you brace yourself for loss before it ever comes. You prepare for disappointment before joy even arrives. That's how the spirit of poverty keeps its grip, not by holding your hands, but by shaping your thoughts. But when you let the psalm renew your mind, it begins to replace fear with faith, resignation with expectation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start to think like someone who is no longer afraid of provision. Begin to believe that blessing isn't something you chase. It's something that flows through alignment. The real battle is not about getting more. It's about thinking differently about what you already have. Gratitude begins to break the rhythm of scarcity. When you start seeing the small as sacred, the little becomes much. Your mind shifts from counting what's missing to noticing what's moving. The psalm teaches you to dwell, not to panic, to rest in the assurance that you are sustained. And when the mind rests in truth, the body, the heart, and the home begin to follow. You see, poverty loses its power when your thoughts stop serving it. Every time you choose faith over fear, every time you speak life over your own uncertainty, every time you refuse to let the old story play again, you are retraining your mind to partner with abundance. You are shifting from the language of never enough to the melody of always provided. The psalm becomes the pattern that your thoughts begin to imitate. Steady, peaceful, rooted in divine confidence. And that's where the shift becomes undeniable. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet and steady. A peace that starts in your thoughts and then radiates into everything you touch. And when your mind finally aligns with truth, the spirit of poverty no longer finds a place to live. There is something sacred about the atmosphere of a home. You can walk into a place and feel whether peace lives there or not. The air carries stories, words once spoken, emotions once buried, prayers once whispered. And sometimes, the spirit of poverty doesn't just touch individuals, it settles into spaces. It lingers in the tension, in the worry that never quite leaves the walls. A home filled with fear, comparison, or constant striving begins to echo with lack. But when you invite the presence of God through the psalm, the atmosphere begins to shift. You're not just reading words, you're opening a door for divine presence to dwell among you. When you speak the psalm aloud in your home, it's as though you are cleaning the air, sweeping away the heaviness, the residue of old disappointments, the silence that once felt suffocating. The word of God carries vibration, and that vibration brings order. It reminds every corner, every shadow, every memory of who reigns there. The spirit of poverty cannot coexist with divine presence. It loses oxygen in the presence of praise. You'll notice the difference. Won't be loud, but it will be real. A calm that feels tangible, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Your home becomes more than walls and a roof. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where your children's laughter carries blessing, where your rest restores, where prayer becomes as natural as breathing. The psalm, when spoken consistently, doesn't just protect your space, it transforms it. Every verse becomes a boundary line drawn in the spirit saying, "This home belongs to God." Lack has no authority here. And it's not superstition, it's alignment. The atmosphere reflects what's honored within it. When you fill your space with gratitude, worship, and faith, your home starts to mirror heaven's rhythm. Sometimes, the most powerful transformation comes not from what enters your home, but from what you choose to remove. The spirit of poverty thrives in complaint, in comparison, in chaos. When you decide to replace negativity with worship, to silence fear with prayer, to make gratitude your daily language, you are teaching your home to breathe again. The psalm becomes the sound of renewal, a rhythm that retrains the atmosphere to host peace instead of pressure. And when that peace settles, you begin to feel it in the smallest things. In the way conversations soften, the way time slows, in the way your heart feels safe even when everything isn't perfect. God's presence becomes the invisible guest that never leaves. It changes the way you speak, the way you give, the way you rest. The psalm doesn't just visit your home, it inhabits it. It takes what felt ordinary and makes it sacred. And in that stillness, you'll feel it, that holy quiet, that unexplainable lightness. That's the moment you know the spirit of poverty has left and peace has made your home its dwelling place. There comes a moment in every journey of faith when you realize that true abundance is not measured by what you hold on to, but by what you are willing to release. The spirit of poverty feeds on fear, fear of losing, fear of not having enough, fear that if you give, you'll never recover. But the kingdom of God operates in a different rhythm. It moves through trust, through flow, through generosity that isn't logical but spiritual. Giving is not a transaction, it's transformation. It's the moment you declare that lack no longer rules your life, that your faith in God's provision is greater than your fear of depletion. Generosity is not about the amount you offer, but the spirit with which you offer it. You could give something small and still shake the heavens if your heart releases it with trust. Because every act of giving, no matter how hidden or humble, sends a message to the unseen: I no longer belong to the cycle of scarcity. You are shifting from the clenched fist of survival to the open hand of faith, and that open hand becomes a channel through which blessings can flow, not just to you, but through you. The psalm that silences the spirit of poverty also awakens a rhythm of giving. It teaches that abundance doesn't begin when you have more, it begins when you recognize you already have enough to share. When you give, you break the illusion that you must hold on tightly to what you have. You step into the divine paradox that in releasing you receive. Because giving is not about loss, it's about alignment. Are aligning your heart with God's own nature, a God who gives endlessly, who never withholds, who pours without measure. When you live with generosity, you begin to notice that everything multiplies. Not always in money, but in meaning. Peace multiplies. Joy multiplies. Opportunities appear where doors once seemed locked. Your world begins to expand because your heart has expanded first. Poverty thrives where fear controls the flow, but the moment you let love and faith guide your giving, the flow returns. You become part of something sacred, a divine circulation of blessing that never runs dry. And it's not just about material generosity. Sometimes what you're called to give is forgiveness, kindness, patience, time. Each act of generosity is a spiritual rebellion against lack. It's saying, I trust the source, not the storage. When you live from that posture, no longer fear the empty places, because you know they will be filled again. You begin to understand that abundance is not a destination. It's a state of being, cultivated every time you give without calculation, every time you trust without proof. And that's when you feel it, the shift, the freedom, the quiet knowing that nothing given in love is ever lost. It's in that moment you realize the spirit of poverty has no claim on you anymore, because your heart has learned the language of abundance. Deliverance is not a single moment of breakthrough. It is a way of living. Many people experience the power of God and feel that instant freedom, the lightness, the joy, peace, But then life resumes, distractions return, and slowly the old mindset begins to whisper again. The truth is, abundance is not sustained by what happens once, it is nurtured by what you choose daily. The psalm may break the spirit of poverty in a moment, but it is your continual alignment with its truth that keeps you walking in freedom. You are not just meant to experience the shift, you are meant to live in it. Walking in abundance means living from a place of trust rather than striving. It means no longer being controlled by fear of loss or disappointment. It's learning that abundance isn't about accumulation, but awareness. Awareness that God's presence is your constant provision. When you live with that understanding, peace replaces panic. You stop rushing to make things happen, and instead, start recognizing what is already unfolding in your favor. The psalm becomes a rhythm you carry inside you, a steady reminder that your life is anchored in something eternal, unshakable, and sufficient. To walk in sustained abundance is to walk in partnership with divine order. It is not about perfection, it's about presence. Every day, you have a choice to dwell in the anxiety of what might go wrong, or to rest in the assurance that your source never runs out. Gratitude becomes your daily practice, not because everything is perfect, but because you are aligned with the one who provides beyond logic. Gratitude doesn't just acknowledge blessing, it multiplies it. It shifts your focus from what's missing to what's moving, from what's lacking to what's lasting. And that awareness keeps your heart soft, your faith strong, your spirit clear. When you walk in sustained abundance, your peace becomes contagious. Your environment begins to reflect your inner state. The people around you sense it. The calm, the steadiness, the quiet confidence that you carry. You no longer strive to prove or to possess. You simply live in overflow. And overflow doesn't mean excess. It means enough to share, enough to give, enough to lift others into freedom too. You become a vessel of what once set you free. The same psalm that shifted your atmosphere now becomes the word that transforms another's. The spirit of poverty cannot return to a heart that has learned to rest in abundance. It has no entry point where peace dwells, no foothold where gratitude lives, no power where faith has taken root. You don't have to fight to keep what God has given you. You simply have to remain in alignment with it. Through trust, through thankfulness, through awareness of His presence. And in that quiet rhythm of trust, you realize abundance was never something to chase. It was something to remember. And now you live in the flow of it, sustained, secure, and free forever.